What's up everybody, this is Rafi at Zurb, and in this video we're going to cover one of the most used components outside of the grid itself, the button. So you're definitely going to need a button at some point in your build, and Foundation has you covered. So a button can be created with a simple class of button, as you can see here, and there's all kinds of modifier classes that you can add to buttons to change their size, their color, and then also how they're presented visually, like disabled, hollow, or with drop-down arrows, and a few other things. So we're going to go ahead and hop over to a live example and just explain the different ways to make a button. So the first thing that's really important is choosing the right kind of tag. So you can create a button class on an anchor tag or a button tag. So it's important that you use the right tag for the right reasons. This is because people that are visually impaired and using a screen reader rely on these tags to know what they do. So, and again, an anchor will send the user off to another page or another website, whereas if you used a button tag, that's for creating an action on the same page. So you can add the class of button, so it's button class button. We'll add some text in here. And so again, using a button tag is creating an action. So let's say we were going to use this button to trigger the off canvas to open, or we were going to trigger a drop down to open. So these are actions that are happening on the same page. So that's the use case for a button. Now let's hop over to some examples of styling these buttons. So you can see that there's different button sizes available, and the way you achieve those is with some simple classes. So we'll take a look at this section. We have a tiny class available, a small class. There's no medium class because that is the default size, so just button by itself would be this medium size. And then there's also a large class. So you're just chaining classes on here. The order doesn't matter. You can say button tiny or tiny button. It doesn't matter. And what this is going to do is change the font size and the padding of the buttons. Now moving down the list, we can take a look at our button colors. So again, these are just modifier classes. So the default button will use the default color in Foundation. And the secondary color class will use the secondary color in Foundation, which is this gray color. And down the line, we have success, which is green, alert, which is red, warning, which is a yellow-orange. And then there's also a disabled class. So we would use the disabled class on a button, maybe in some instances where we don't want the user to be able to click on something until they've created another action on the page. Maybe like before they fill out a form, it's going to be disabled, and then you remove the class once the form is filled in and validated. That might be a use case for this disabled class. And so you can see what it does is it actually gives the user an indication that they cannot click there. It mutes the color of the primary color, and you would actually remove the click on that. So moving on down the line, we have hollow buttons. So this is a new feature to Foundation 6. You can now make your buttons hollow, and by adding a hollow modifier class along with the button class, it will take the background out and create this hollow effect. And so you can have a hollow secondary button, which is this gray. You can have a hollow success button, which is this green. Now, this green one is a little bit larger than the rest of the buttons, and that's because there's also a large class on it. So this just shows you that you can chain multiple classes together to get the effect that you want. So if I want this particular button to be a large button, I can just add the large class. And down the line, you have alert and warning. So another really cool thing is the expanded button. So if you add the class of expanded to the button, it's going to go 100% width of the container that it's in. So in this case, it's in a small 12, so a full width container, and it just has the padding of the columns wrapping around it. So you can see that no matter what size my screen is, this button is going to expand full width. So this is cool. And what if we wanted to see what happens if we make this container smaller? So we'll make this a 6-column container now. And you can see that the button is 6 columns wide. Also, a really nice trick is you can see here in Foundation 6, you can combine the row and column class if there's only one column. And by giving it a size, it'll actually center that column in the middle. So really neat trick there. So that's it for the default classes in buttons. We're also going to hop over to the Foundation settings file if you're using the SAS version and show you some quick ways to modify your buttons. So we're going to search for buttons. Okay, so it's in the settings file. We have a button section, and you can see all the variables that can control buttons. So we have button padding, button margin, button fill, button background, button hover color. So you can adjust all these settings to get your buttons exactly the way you want them. You also have this button sizing map here, and these sizes map to the classes that you can add to change the size of your buttons. So if you want to modify those default sizes, you can just do that here. This will modify the padding around the button and of course the font size as well. So all in one setting here. And just moving down the list, one thing that you might notice is that there's also the ability to add a border radius to these buttons. So the button radius variable is set to the global radius. So what that means is if we go back up to the global section at the top and we find global radius, right now global radius is set to 0. So one thing you can do, and this keeps your radius consistent throughout all the components that use border radius, like callouts, buttons, and other things, you could set that up here. So something like 3 pixels. And you can save that, and now all your buttons will have a 3-pixel border radius, and so will your callouts and everything else that uses the global radius variable. But you can also hard code a value in here instead. So instead of global radius, if you want your buttons to have more radius than other elements, then you could do that here. So something like that, 5 pixels, save that, and now all your buttons have a border radius on them. So there you go. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with the Foundation buttons.